In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you the basics of animation. In the second part of this tutorial, we'll take that animation and we'll bring it over to the Blender game engine. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and animate this cube very simply. So the first step in animation is that you come down here to the timeline and you left click and you get your frame playhead to where you want it to go. You'll see that you've got your the green bar down here, and that follows you wherever you left click and drag. You've got your start box down here telling you what frame you're starting on, and that's usually going to be frame 1. And you have your end frame down here as well, and telling you when you want to finish your animation. The Blender game engine typically operates at 60 frames per second, and we talked about what that means in class, so just remember that, 60 frames per second. So if I want to create a 2-second animation, I'm going to change my end frame to 120 frames. I can zoom in to the timeline with the scroll wheel, and there we are. And most importantly, this little box right down here, if I click inside, I can type in any frame I want to jump to, hit return, and it will jump to that frame. I can use these buttons over here to jump to the first frame, the last frame, and of course, most importantly, I can press play. Okay, so animation is broken down into 3 very basic steps. The first step is make a change in the timeline. Second step is to make a change to the object. And the third step is to record the change. So the first step I've done is I've gone to frame 1. Second step is I'm going to go ahead and move the cube over here on the left-hand side of the screen. Third step is I'm going to press I to insert a keyframe. So we're only going to worry about location, rotation, scaling, and then a combination of the 3. You could just go ahead and choose lock, rot, scale, and that is the safest of all of them, because then it's going to record all of the changes on location, rotation, and scale. And if you ever want to go back and re-keyframe a change that you've made, you'll be all set. So you really can't go wrong there. For this example, I'm just going to make changes on location, and there we go, I've recorded it. Now I'm going to go to frame 120, my end frame, and I'm going to go ahead and drag it all the way over here to the right. I'll press I, and I'll record the change on location. So that's it. If I press play, you'll now see I have a really simple animation. Now I need this to play back at 60 frames per second. So the way you do that in the game engine is you come over here to the render panel, which is the camera. You're going to scroll down to the bottom, and you're going to see this category here called display, and you're going to change that to 60 frames per second. Now when I press play, you'll see it really shows 2 seconds. Okay. Now if I want to tweak this, I might want to go to, say, frame 60, and I'll make a change. I'm going to have it go up. I'll insert a keyframe on the location, and now I'll go ahead and press play, and now you'll see it makes the change. And I can of course watch that from any zoom level, and I can watch it from any angle. Okay, so now if I wanted to make another change, let's say I wanted it to, and I'm just going to make some random changes here. Let's say on frame 32, I wanted it to rotate on the y-axis like that. I'll insert a change or insert a keyframe, and this time I'm changing both the location and I'm changing the rotation, so I'm just going to go ahead and do lock, rot. There we go. So now if I go back, you'll notice that on frame 1 it has the exact same rotation as the next keyframe, and the reason for that is because I didn't keyframe its rotation on frame 1. So what I have to do is I have to go back to frame 1, press R to rotate, and I have to reset the rotation on frame 1. Okay, I could also let me undo that, and I could also on frame 1 I could just press Option R and that would reset the rotation, but I have to key in, so I have to press I, and I'm going to choose lock, rot, And there we go. Now Blender sees the change between these two frames. And there we go. And then I can come back down to frame 120. I could reset the rotation. And there we are. So you kind of have to have an idea of what you're going to do before you actually animate. And that's really why I said if you press I and you choose Lock Rod Scale, you're doing it safely, and you can go ahead and you can make any changes on location, rotation, or scale. Okay, so moving on. Now let's say I've made my keyframes and I'm really happy with what I've got, and now I want to edit them. So I'm going to come down here in the bottom left-hand corner, and I'm going to change this timeline editor. I'm going to change that to be a dope sheet editor. I'm going to change the height of the bottom window by left-clicking and dragging on this black line. Okay, so you'll see here that over on the left-hand side it says the name of the object that I'm working with, and it's cube, and you'll see that I can actually see the breakdown of all of the different changes that are happening. So even though it looks like I've got a ton of keyframes over here, I actually only have 4, and they're in columns, so 1, 2, 3, and 4. The orange bar in the middle, if you're wondering what that means, is it means that there's no change happening between these two keyframes. And you can see that happening on the screen here. It's just rising up. It's not actually making any changes there. Okay, to simplify this over here, I'm going to go ahead and click on this little triangle here, and you can see that it basically makes much cleaner and easier on the eyes. Okay, so now to edit this, tweak it, fix it, what I can do is down here in the dope sheet, I'm going to go ahead and press the letter A, and when I press A, it deselects all. If I press A again, it's going to select them all. So what I can do is I can now I can go ahead and I can rearrange them. For instance, if I want to allow this keyframe here to have more time, I can give it more time. So all I did was to select a keyframe. You right-click on it. If I want to select both keyframes, I can shift right-click, and I can press G and grab them and move them, and I can actually change when this happens. So I can make it happen over here. I can right-click and select this and press G and grab it and make it give more time, so that's a longer hold. I'm going to go ahead and play, and you'll see that it basically does that over a longer amount of time. So to play the animation, I'm pressing Option A. To stop the animation, I'm pressing Escape. Okay, so now you know how to select keyframes. You know how to press G and grab them and move them. Basically, if I give them more time, I'm giving them more time to do their actions. If I give them less time, like that, it's going to go through and be really quick. So I'll play that, and you can see it speeds up. Okay, if I want to delete a keyframe, I can select the keyframe and I can press X, and I'll choose Delete Keyframe, and there you go. So those are the basics. If I decide that 120 frames is not enough, I can go back to the timeline. I can come down here and I can change it to give it more keyframes, and then I'll be all set. I'll have more time. Okay, so the dope sheet will allow you to tweak your animation, and you'll be pretty much good to go. Okay, and that's it for this first part, this introduction to animation. In part 2, I'll take the same animation, or I'll go ahead and I'll animate a platform moving up and down, and I'll show you how to bring that into the game engine. Good luck, and I'll see you in part 2.